Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I'm going to walk through this homework assignment pretty quickly. My expectation is that you've already looked at it, and so you should have a pretty good awareness of some of the big things. You know, like vertical shift is right here, amplitude is right here. This is the B value that affects period, and here's our horizontal shift once we take this B value out. So for this first one, you can see that the horizontal or the vertical shift gets my new x-axis down here at -2. When I factor out this B value, then this horizontal shift becomes positive pi over 2, which moves my y-axis to right here. Okay, now this is a sine function, so that always starts at the origin. Now because my B value is 2, the period goes from 2 pi to pi, so that means I just have to scoot down pi units, and here's where it ends. Halfway between those two, it always passes through the axis. And then I pay attention to this A value and go, well, my amplitude is 2, but because it's negative, it starts by going down. So it goes through here and through here. And so this is what it should look like. Not perfect, but you get the idea. Okay, this next one says y equals -1.5. So here, I'm going to go ahead and get rid of these, and I'm going to show you where my new axis is going to be. -1.5, so here's the new x-axis. I factor out this 2, and that changes this 3 pi to 3 pi over 2, but it's a negative shift. So it goes all the way back to here. So there's my new origin. Now with cosine, that always starts above or below the origin. And so because it says -2.5, that's going to go -2.5 below my origin. And then because this is a 2, again, that affects my period, makes my period only 1 pi, so the whole thing's going to end right here. Halfway between those two, it's going to hit the kind of opposite extreme, which means it's going to pass through this point. And halfway between those, it always passes through the axis. So it should look something like this. There we go. Okay. All right, next one. Let's see here. Okay. Here we've got, when we factor out the B value of 1/2, remember 2 pi divided by 1/2 is the same thing as 2 pi times 2. So what that does is that makes my period 4 pi. All right, so that's going to make this super long. When I factor out that 1/2, it's going to change this plus pi to plus 2 pi, which means that's going to change my horizontal shift all the way back here to -2 pi. My vertical shift is -1. That's not a big move. But now my period is 4 pi. So sine always starts at the origin, and 4 pi units later, it's going to go through the same height. Halfway between those two, it's going to pass through the same height. Now this has an amplitude of 3, but because that number is negative, it's going to start by going down. 1, 2, 3. So it's going to pass through this point. And then halfway between these next two, it's going to go up 3, which will be about here. All right, now this is a pretty big one, so I'm going to draw it in sections. Otherwise, I can't draw it very well. Not that I can draw it that great to begin with. Okay. It looks something like that. There we go. Okay, so that's what I have. Now, let's look at the next one. The next one, I've got to factor out this B value, which again, changes my period to pi. But when I take it out of here, that means I get a horizontal shift of positive pi over 2. So my new y-axis is here. Vertical shift, -3. So my new x-axis is right here. Now, it's got a period of pi. Cosine always starts above or below. Because this one is negative, it's going to start 2 units below. So it's going to be down here. And so it's going to end at the same height. Halfway between those two, it's going to have the opposite extreme. And then halfway between those, it's going to pass through that axis. So it's going to look like that. All right. All right, next, now we're on the back. Now the back had all sorts of crazy fractions, and this might have freaked you guys out, but as you take out a 2/3, you just got to remember that what happens is you got to multiply by the reciprocal for it to factor out. So I'm going to put that 2/3 right here. So this is going to be x. If I multiply this by the reciprocal, this is going to become 2 pi. 4/3 times 3/2 is 2. So that means my horizontal shift is all the way back here. My vertical shift is non-existent. It doesn't have a vertical shift, so it stays right here. All right? My amplitude is 2, and because my B value is 2/3, I got to think about that and go 2 pi divided by 2/3, you flip and multiply, you get 2 pi times 3/2, which means 3 pi is my new period. So it starts way back here, and it ends 3 pi units, which would be right here. Now this is a sine function, so it starts at the origin, it ends at the same height. Halfway between those two, which would be here, it passes through the axis. It's got an amplitude of 2, and it's positive, so it goes up 2, right here. And that means between these latter two, it goes down 2, right here. So it should look something like that. Now I know this had lots of fractions, And so that might have made it kind of tough for you. But we got to be able to deal with that stuff. It's hard when we're factoring out a fraction. We got to remember that we got to multiply by the reciprocal. Okay, so for this next one, same kind of thing. So we're going to end up with -2 minus 2 cosine. We take off, and now we've got take off that 4/3, which is going to give us with x minus, now we got to multiply by 3/4, which makes this pi over 2. Okay, now that 4/3, you go, okay, 2 pi divided by 4/3 is the same thing as 2 pi times 3/4, which gives me 6 pi over 4, which is 3 pi over 2. So my period is 3 pi over 2. My horizontal shift is positive pi over 2. So that means I start, let's see, my horizontal shift is here. My vertical shift, it went down 2 units, so that's going to be down here. So there's my new origin. And the period is 3 pi over 2. So it starts here and ends here. But this is cosine, so that always starts above or below. Because this is a -2, it's going to start 2 units below. That's going to be right here. And it's going to end at the same height. Halfway between those two, it's going to be here. Halfway between those, which is kind of in an odd spot, it's going to pass through the axis. So it's going to look something like that. I know it's not perfect, but you know what I mean. Okay, last one. Oops, let's see here. Last one. Let's try to get there. There we go. Okay, these are pretty straightforward. These should be really simple. Okay, for this first one, it's got a vertical shift of +1. When you factor out that 1/2, the horizontal shift is -2 pi. It has an amplitude of 4. It has a period of 4 pi. It's sine, so it starts at the origin, ends at the same height, halfway between right here. An amplitude of 4 would bring it all the way up to here and all the way down to here. So this is going to look like this. Oh, man, that part got ugly. Let's try that again. There we go. Okay. And there we go. Something like that. Okay, and this last part, y equals -4 plus cosine of 2x minus pi. When I factor out that b value, this becomes -pi over 2, which is a positive horizontal shift. Would move it to right here. This -4 is a negative vertical shift, which moves my axes to right there. So here's my new origin, down here, okay? Now cosine always starts above or below. Amplitude of this one is 1. It's going to start above. It's going to end at the same height, which is going to be, but I got to remember, okay, the b value is 2, so that means my period is pi. So it's going to end right here. Halfway between, it's going to hit the low point. Halfway between those, it's going to pass through the axes. And there's an announcement. Okay, hope this helped.